We will have quorum. And you think that he'll be probably gone for a good chunk of the morning?
That's correct.
Okay. One more minute for the remaining members to join. Great. Are we good to go, Rob?
Yep, I will start the recording now, Tara.
Thanks. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the first meeting of the Redevelopment Task Force. Before we get started with the presentation this morning, we will proceed with the election of the chair and the vice chair. I'll just note that these positions are for the remainder of the council term, so it is a 4-year position. So having said that, are there any nominations for the position of chair for this task force? Councillor Mackey?
Thanks, Tara. I would nominate Councillor Andrea Matrasoff.
Okay, is there a seconder for that motion? Councillor McKay? Thank you. Are there any other nominations for the position of chair? Councillor Matrasoff?
Thank you. Through you, Madam Clerk. Thank you very much for the nomination, and I would stand. However, I would like to open it up to others who might be interested as well. I would like to perhaps nominate Mayor McQueen or Councillor McQueen, as he comes with further experience than I have here at Grey County Council.
Okay. Thank you. And is there a seconder for that nomination? Seconder for the nomination of Councillor McQueen for chair. Seeing none. Councillor Matrasoff, I will just confirm your intention to stand. If you could confirm it at this time, that would be great. Officially.
Yes, I will accept. Thank you very much.
You. And can I have a motion to close nominations? Councillor McKay? Thank you. So Councillor Matrasoff, you are acclaimed as chair for the redevelopment task force. Are there any nominations for vice chair? Councillor McKay?
I'll nominate Paul McQueen.
Okay. Is there a seconder for that nomination?
I will second.
Great. Are there any other nominations for the position of vice chair? Seeing none, Councillor McQueen, do you wish to let your name stand?
Holy smokes, I got in here late and look what happens, right? Yeah, I guess I'll accept. Thank you for my nominations.
And can I have a motion to close nominations as well? Councillor Mackey? Great. So Councillor Matrasoff, I will pass it over to you.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. So with that, we are able to move on to item number 3, which is a declaration of pecuniary interest. Are there any declarations to be made? Seeing and hearing none, we can then move on to item number 4, which is delegations. So with us for the delegations, we have Andrew Rodriguez, Senior Project Manager from Collier's Project Leaders, and also Deborah Wadsworth, the Associate of Cassian. And with that, I believe we have slides to go with that. Is that correct?
Yeah, I'll be sharing my screen.
Okay, well, with that, then I would like to pass the floor over to you, Andrew. And if you want to make your presentation with the slides, and then back through the chair, we'll entertain questions You don't have that many slides, so I imagine it will probably make sense for you to go ahead and just present it in its entirety, and then we'll ask questions at the end. Is that what you
Yeah.
foresee?
No problem. And if there happen to be any questions throughout the presentation, I am happy to stop and discuss it throughout. So certainly feel free if anything comes to mind throughout the presentation.
Okay, I will keep my eye out then for any virtual hands that may come up while you're presenting.
Okay, thank you very much. So good morning, everyone. Today's update is going to be very much focused on schedule and work plan for the remainder of the year, as well as looking at what we need to do to achieve the first resident date in 2026, and also focusing on a recent announcement by the Ministry of Long-Term Care in terms of critical milestones for long-term care development and redevelopment projects in the province in order to access some of the additional funding that was announced by the ministry late last year. Can everyone see the presentation okay?
Yes.
Okay, great. So in terms of agendas, I will start off by just providing a little bit of an overview and briefing in terms of what were the critical milestones submitted in the ministry's memo and what that means for our project. We had a chance to discuss this considerably in quite short order with the project team and design team to look at what's in the art of the possible and where we think we can identify some opportunities for accelerating timeline to meet these milestones. And I'd like to have a discussion today and just to show you how we propose to meet these milestones and what are some of the implications from a risk perspective. And then I also want to spend a little bit of time at the end of the presentation talking about what are some of the key updates or decisions that will be required from task force, council, or as well as from West Grey to support the project and timeline. And then we'll leave some time at the end for questions, as well as if there are questions throughout the presentation. So in summary, we received a memo on February 3rd, which contained some fixed milestones that projects need to meet in order to be eligible for the increased one-time funding that was announced by the ministry late last year or in November. So that construction additional funding is essentially a supplement to the construction funding subsidy, and it works out to $35 per bed per day over a 25-year period for eligible projects. Now, there is some additional benefits that are available for not-for-profits and municipal homes, such as converting $15 of the $35 to be paid upfront at the start of construction and to reduce the borrowing requirements. So this doesn't go into all the nuances, and some of that will be articulated during our March meeting. But in summary, it is a very sizable and significant increased funding that would apply for this project. One of the requirements that was communicated before Christmas is that projects need to reasonably expect to start construction by August 31st. So as you can imagine, this leaves room for a lot of interpretation in terms of how you get to that ready to construct by August 31st. And really what the ministry have done in their memo is they've tightened up what milestones need to be met in the interim in order to hit that date, so that there's consistency across the board or across the province with other projects who are in a similar position. So in summary, what these milestones entail is preliminary drawing submission and financing confirmed by February 28th, final working drawings and municipal approvals on track by March 31st, a development agreement, which is the contract between the operator and the ministry, signed by April 7th, and licensing documentation, so this has to do with additional bed licenses, by April 30th. Tendering complete and bids reviewed by July 18th. And then an approval to construct package submitted to the ministry by August 11th. So this means that we've gone out to tender. We have received and reviewed the submissions. There's been a package that's gone forward to task force and council. And then we're in a position to submit something to the ministry. As soon as the ministry approve, a contract can be awarded. So quite a few activities between now and August, obviously, that have to take place in addition to the design to meet these milestones. So what I've shown on this table here is, with the ministry's new milestones, what type of variance is there in relation to our work plan that was in place well before this announcement came forward. And what you see in red is where there's a variance. So preliminary plan submitted. This one is actually complete. We submitted before mid last year, and there was a little bit of back and forth in resubmissions, but we're at a point where they're considered approved with no further technical comments. So we're in a really good position in relation to the first milestone. The second milestone, working drawing submission and municipal approvals on track, had a variance of about 1 week with what the ministry's looking for. Not too concerning, and we have a plan in place to recover that. So that one nevertheless did have a 1 week variance. We met with our ministry assigned project manager about a week and a half ago, and in relation to the signed development agreement and the licensing documentation, there's nothing that is really outstanding on Grey County's end, or that Grey County even needs to be aware of for these two to move forward. It's mostly an administrative or procedural exercise. So there's no risk or nothing that I see as worthy of mentioning in terms of an update to the group this morning. Those are just processes that are moving forward with the ministry, and we don't expect any issues as a result of those being handled. Then tendering completed and bids reviewed. We had this originally scheduled for September 11th, so almost a 2-month variance, slightly shy of a 2-month variance from what the ministry is looking for, July 18th. And then the approval to construct package submitted, we had this also in September 11th, which is a month later than what the ministry was looking for. And part of where we were gaining time, where we went from 8 weeks to 4 weeks, is that where a lot of the standalone not-for-profits may have an extended period to secure and confirm financing after tenders have been closed. The strategy that was always considered for this project was to get as much of that work done up front, so that after tender closes with a buffer in place, it doesn't require a 2-month or even a 3-month process to finalize the financing. That would have been done to the greatest extent possible ahead or in parallel with going out for tender. What we've done is we've put our heads together and looked at where we can save time and what are some of the low-hanging fruit areas. And it was, quite honestly, to start with, already a quite accelerated schedule without much float. So it took a lot of looking at some creative solutions and how can we do things differently, because the ministry has also indicated to us that there isn't any flexibility with these milestones or deadlines. If it isn't met, then potentially there may be a round of funding for 2024, but that's yet to be announced and the terms aren't known. So we've gone at this with the perspective of let's look at everything we can do in order to compress our schedule and to meet these milestones. So the third column on the right, proposed work plan, shows where we think we can be in relation to the new milestones, which is in summary, meeting all of the milestones where there was a delta ahead of time. So in terms of completing tender, having the approval to construct package to the ministry, as well as the final working drawings, which is on track for end of March. There are 3 main strategies that the team is proposing in order to achieve and shave some time off our critical path. The first one is the elimination of a Class A pre-tender construction cost estimate. And if the project was not under a time constraint, this is something we had built under our work plan, because as the design progresses at key milestones, we like to get a construction cost estimate prepared by a quantity surveyor, and we use that to see what is the forecasted cost vis-a-vis market conditions, and we use that to inform if there's going to be any value engineering, reductions to scope, or looking for opportunities to decrease or adjust costs. So we did that at the Class D stage. We have one that is forthcoming at the Class B level of accuracy. We would have had another one at the Class A right before going out to tender, but what we are proposing now is to eliminate the Class A estimate in order to reduce a month's time off the remaining design and cost estimate timeline. What it means is we're going to be spending more time and having more scrutiny with the Class B cost estimate, because this would be, so to speak, our last kick of the can before to inform the design before going out to tender. The second piece is the elimination of a bid document review. This was not part of the base scope of services, but we had proposed in the earlier phase of the project, as this being an option to help increase the quality and coordination of the document. So typically what this would involve is you take up a set of construction documents, you circulate it to a neutral constructor, so not someone who would bid on this project, and you have them look for areas where there may be ambiguities, for example, between different disciplines, different trades. And then you use that to button up the contract documents as much as possible to avoid any potential, or to minimize, I'd say, areas of ambiguity that could lead to changes during construction. So this was more of a value add quality process. It wasn't part of our base scope, but had we had time, this would have been something we would have recommended. So this is a bit of an easy one to say, let's go ahead and eliminate this and the time associated with it, which would happen right before going out to tender. And the third one is the earlier submission of the building permit application package. We had this essentially right before going out to tender originally, and now we're looking at opportunities to bring this back a few weeks such that it doesn't push our critical path, and it allows us to go out to tender, or to position the project to go out to tender in early June. From a risk standpoint, this is an important piece of the conversation. There are, of course, some risks with looking to accelerate the timeline on the critical path, and it's important for members of task force and council just to understand what this entails in order to meet these milestones. And the first one, which is probably the one with the bigger impact, is that the reasonable amount of time that I would say we would have had to complete the design is really making sure that the architect and all the sub-consultants have enough time to coordinate between each of the different disciplines. As a result of compressing it, it heightens the risk of having some coordination issues, whether they're errors or omission or coordination errors that are apparent during construction. There's now less time to coordinate the design and do some of the quality checks. So as much as the design team will put their best foot forward and have some timeline built in there for third-party reviews, it is being exceptionally compressed. So we would expect as a result there to be a higher degree of changes that occurs during construction. And as a result, we would strongly suggest to mitigate that by carrying a higher percentage of post-contract contingency. So that would be specifically to cover items that may come up from authorities having jurisdiction, site conditions, errors and omissions, and coordination issues that come up during construction. What it doesn't cover is owner requests. So that's one item that if there's an owner request that comes up during construction, we would always go through the process to look for what is the additional funding source, because contingency would not be appropriate funding source for owner requests during construction. The other piece there is to defer all non-essential scope where feasible. So I listed one here, for example, the Village Square fit up, and the logic here is really to look at ensuring the design team can fully focus on wrapping up the key design for the long-term care component, the assisted living, the base build for the Village Square, not the fit up, and any other activities that can be deferred. We would defer it so that it's not pulling the design team's focus away from key items that are needed to go out to tender with a well-coordinated package and to submit a package to the ministry in early August for an approval to construct. The second item here is tenders closing higher than the values that are derived from the Class B construction cost estimate. So to give the task force a quick update over here, we are going to be going into the numbers in much more detail in the March meeting, but typically your cost consultant will build in allowances. So a design and pricing allowance for design work that hasn't occurred yet, but that is forthcoming, that will have scope and dollar amounts associated with it. There's allowances that are built in for escalation up until the time of tender, and there are contingencies that are built in. But of course, the earlier your estimate is done with respect to the design advancement or going out to tender, there's also variability that could be expected with those allowances. They may not purely represent what you will get during tender. So if there would happen to be a variance where tenders close higher than the Class B, then that could lead to either some value engineering that has to happen after the tenders have closed, which is not the ideal time to be doing that, but it's not uncommon to work with contractor to look at where you can modify scope after tenders closed in order to align with the budget. It may require a budget increase after tenders closed if there are elements that Grey County is not willing to adjust or modify in order to bring down the budget. We talked about higher scrutiny of the Class B cost estimate. So this is happening right now. We have had a chance to review a draft. We're expecting the final version this week. We'll be able to review it internally and have those numbers to the task force by mid-March. And then the last one here, which we see generally carried in cost estimators reports, is to carry a tender or bidding contingency. It's treated more of a management reserve, but it's to account for any overages that could happen as a result of the tender period that aren't reasonably forecasted by the cost consultant through the cost estimates that were prepared. So this is another mechanism or lever that's available. A lot of it will, of course, have to do with the ability to fund and finance the projects based on the current forecasted costs. So not, it's not all organizations would be able to have an amount for this and have it as high as they want, but it is nevertheless a mechanism that we'd certainly suggest that Grey County have a look at to include to protect against some overages that would not have been factored in the Class B. The third risk here that we noted is just unfavorable market conditions. And this happens when you have a limited pool of contractors who are either not aware of the project or are carrying disproportionate profit margins or contingencies in their bids. And part of this may also be exacerbated by the ministry's timelines and milestones and creating a bit of a bubble where there's going to be multiple operators throughout the province who are rushing to go out to tender at the same time, and a limited pool of contractors to do projects at this size and complexity. And so what we're proposing to do, which was always part of our base work plan, is to pre-qualify general contractors to gauge the market interest. And what this would entail is going out before the tender period. So this would be in the March to May timeframe. And we'd go out to pre-qualify general contractor and to develop a pool of ideally 4 to 7 general contractors who would then be invited to bid on the project. And the contractors would be pre-qualified on the basis of personnel, experience from the company, safety record, financial capacity, and also the completion of comparable projects that are either ongoing or in the past. So those are some of the factors we'd use when pre-qualifying a pool. This will give us a sense as to the market's interest and availability to take on a project of this size. And it would also help us eliminate potential contractors who could bid on the project but may not have the experience and track record for similar types of projects. So these are really the 3 main risks. It's not a comprehensive risk register. There's certainly other risks for the project, but these would represent, in our assessment, the 3 highest or incremental risks that are brought on as a result of trying to meet these ministry milestones and access the additional funding for the project. In terms of overall schedule, we have not changed the June 2026 first resident date. What we've done is we've slightly accelerated the contract document, the tender phase, as well as the construction period. We've brought it up by a couple months. We haven't brought the first resident date forward, mainly because we don't know exactly what that will do to construction. We'd like to use those 2 months to allow the contractor, if they have a more efficient path to finish this earlier, great. We'd certainly like to pass on that benefit to Grey County for the project. But our intent would be to leave that first resident date the same to give us the greatest amount of buffer with the ministry, and until tenders have closed and we have a clear picture of what is the timeline that represents the most cost-effective submission from the contractors. And with that piece of information, we would report any deviation, should there be one, with regard to the June 2026 first resident date. Other activities that will happen during the contract documents, permits, and approvals is working with West Grey in relation to the site plan application, the site plan approval, and the building permits. I talked about the pre-qualification of general contractors. There's also continuing engagement and discussions with the lender, which would be Infrastructure Ontario in this case. Those discussions will have to carry forward to support the tender timeline as well as the approval to construct package to the ministry, which requires some evidence of financing in place with a lender before the ministry gives the go-ahead to award. Okay, so in terms of the last slide here, I wanted to give a sense as to the task force. What are some of the key activities or decisions that are forthcoming, and when we see these mapping out between now and August? Some of these will be shaded in gray, and they don't have specific dates because we are going to work out exactly what month it may fall in and what date it would, but this will give you a good idea of key decision activities that must happen before August and when we think would be the most reasonable time. So in March, we're March 14th. This meeting's already booked right now. This will be to look at the results of the Class B construction cost estimate, what that does to the total project cost forecast. There will be a staff report looking at the financial implications based on project costs. So this will be part of the package and discussion for the March 14th meeting. There will also be part of the discussion will be an overview of the assisted living ASL operating model. So this will be a small portion of the discussion reserved for our March 14th session. During the month of March and April, we're also going to be working with West Gray in terms of their staff and their council to provide an overview of the site plan following the submission, which is planned for end of February, so exactly in a week from today. As well as attending a meeting for the Joint Accessibility Advisory Committee, which is also planned for March 22nd. In the month of May, we are anticipating coming back to the task force after concluding the process for pre-qualifying general contractors. And our proposed approach would be to submit a memo summarizing the process and the results. That memo would be circulated with members of the task force, and we'd have a chance to review it together during the month of May, and we would be seeking for the task force approval to proceed based on the results. That puts us in a position where we would have a list of eligible contractors to bid who would be invited to bid on the project. We also anticipate either during the month of May, optimistically, if not during the month of June, to have the approval of a new capital work borrowing bylaw in place. And working with Infrastructure Ontario, this bylaw has to be put in place before a financing agreement is fully executed. So reasonably, we think May is achievable, but it will be May or June where this would be something brought forward to task force and our council to have this in place and support the financing discussions with IO. And then last but not least is the review and approval of tender results and recommendation to award. It was noted that there is an AMO conference in August that happens close to that date. So we would be targeting to do this in the first few days of August pre-AMO and ahead of the August 11th deadline to get our package across to the ministry. There's a series of other meetings and milestones that are not reflected here that are happening either with staff from Grey County, staff from Rockwood Terrace. But what we really wanted to hone in here with the members of task force is just what are some of the key activities and decisions that are forthcoming. So you have an idea of how we've mapped this out vis-a-vis the ministry's accelerated milestones and deadlines. That concludes my update on schedule and what we have done to align our work plan with the ministry's milestones. I'm happy to answer any questions now from any members.
Thank you, Mr. Rodriguez. And I guess perhaps hold on to those slides, have them ready in case there's reference to it, although we all have our own copies as well. So I'll just ask at this time if anybody would like to raise their virtual hand if they have a question. Okay, and we'll go over to Vice Chair McQueen.
Well, thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Andrew, for running through that. Ambitious, but certainly great to see us moving forward in a time frame that I feel we can, comfortably make, with a few spots that we have to sort of push it a little bit. But my question is with regards to the AMO, pre-AMO, I guess I would assume that we would need to be booking it with the minister at AMO if need be. Is that the idea there, in the sense that if we need to have that further conversation with the ministry, we could have that conversation at AMO? Is that the intent, or no?
if I may, through you, Madam Chair, the reference there was really in reference to our scheduled dates. The intention is that we would discuss the final results of the tender and have a resolution from council to proceed at our August 10th meeting, which is already in your calendars. And then coming out of that meeting, we'd be in a position to forward the materials onto the ministry and meet the deadline that they've set for us is August 11th. That's all. It was just to say that we just wanted to get ahead of that.
Thank you for that clarity. And I mean, we always have that in the back drawer. If we need to have that, we can always, if we need to move things, if things aren't moving along as quickly as we want or whatever. But thank you for that clarity.
Okay, thank you very much. Are there any other questions from task force members? All right, I'll ask at this time, Ms. Wadsworth, did you want to add anything to it? Because I know that you were on the list as co-presenting.
Nothing to add, thank you.
Okay, thank you. And with that, I'll go out to any further comments from Grey County staff? Oh, okay, see none there. And I do see Councillor Greig has his hand up. So we'll go to him first and then we'll go to Councillor McKay.
Thank you very much, Chair. So just a bit of a backdrop. I don't build $200 million projects for a living, which is why we rely on Colliers for your professionalism. And I'm pretty comfortable with everything you've presented to this point. One document which I refer to is a guide to cost predictability, and it's the federal government industry task force working paper. And within it, there is a fulsome list of items, I think, to enhance someone's comfort level with the accuracy of Class B estimates. And I'm not going to go through them all because there's probably a page and a half of them. I feel like in the schematics which were presented at the special council meeting, most of them were entailed in that. My question would be, are there any particular items which the presenters here today would like to identify, which we should be aware of? And secondly, the building timelines for where they are. Is there anything about the location of the build in being in Durham, somewhat of a remote community, and or timelines when there's certain components, if you're constructing in winter, everything slows down? So just a little bit of insight on what you've gathered to this point on those considerations.
Sure. So I'll start in terms of the market. Based on our analysis of similar projects that have been completed in and around the area, including the Markdale Hospital, and our work with the cost consultant, we don't anticipate this to be a condition where there won't be interest from the market or there will be limited bidders. The pre-qualification process will serve as a much better gauge, but based on what we've seen and heard, we don't expect this to be a major concern for a project of this size and scope moving forward and within our timelines. We have found that with the ministry, the most critical milestone is getting the shovel in the ground. And in terms of completion date, the approach we would suggest is to ask the contractors, what date will you reach substantial performance? And we can also ask them what if there is a premium or credit associated with meeting the June 2026 date. What that allows us to do is to not impose a milestone that may have a cost premium that wouldn't be covered by the ministry. So as we get closer to finalizing the contract documents, this is the type of language we would put in there to look to obtain the most cost-effective schedule, and then to be able to articulate that with the ministry to look at, will they fund a premium to accelerate, or will they accept what would be a most cost-effective submission to get the project completed. The third element in terms of schematics and costs that we may be aware of that would be forthcoming, I think one of the biggest ones, and we got off a call recently talking about this, is how far to go along the sustainability spectrum In other words, will it be a net zero ready initial build or net zero that would include some additional solar PV panels? And so fully hashing out what that would look like and even what the cost implications will be something that we are intending to bring back to task force for further discussion. And we are aiming to have this ready for the March meeting so we can have a more fulsome discussion.
Okay, thank you. I see lots of heads nodding on the Grey County staff there as well. So thank you. Next, we'll move on to Councillor McKay.
Yes, thank you. Through you, Chair, to Andrew. Do you have any idea of how many contractors, hopefully in Grey County, but at least in Ontario, that are big enough to be able to construct one of these projects?
It really depends based on geographic market, based on the projects we're involved with, which are a dozen across the province now. They will vary. You will have some common names that have multiple offices throughout the province, but we don't have anything to comment on at this stage that would suggest that there's a risk that we won't have capacity from the market to undertake this project. As I mentioned, the pre-qualification process that we'll be completing and have some results to you in the month of May will really be the process that carries more weight to it in terms of testing the market and getting feedback from them. But based on what we've heard to date and other competing projects in and around the region, there's nothing to suggest that we would be in a position of either having limited or no contractors with the ability to perform this work.
Okay, thank you very much. And next we'll return back over to Vice Chair McQueen.
Well, thank you, Madam Chair. And I sort of got some of my questions answered, but I will iterate that, following along with the Markdale Hospital, as I understand that they've been on schedule, a little bit ahead of schedule. It's scheduled to open up, I think, the end of September, which is great news. And so obviously they have been, I guess, dealing with contractors and, as we heard, way back in, we started going down this road in August of 21. So it's, I guess my question to you, Andrew, is does it seem to be fairly stable in the sense, because, we came out of COVID, we had all those things that, we're all over the place and workforce and all that kind of stuff. And I'm sort of gathering from your comments today that you're quite confident that moving forward, things are somewhat stable. And I guess that's more be subjective, but I just wondered if your comments on that.
Yeah, it is. There are still challenges with the supply chain, and you hear some stories of subcontractors getting pricing that's only good for 10 or 15 days. So these are all items that factor into contractors' pricing, and when they are looking to enter into a stip sum contract, how they factor that into their pricing, their risk is certainly a consideration. But so I think some of that will still be in play. But the advantage that we are expecting is that this won't be limited to, we don't foresee only one or two people bidding on this job. We do expect there to be a reasonable amount of competitiveness. So anyone competing will still have to sharpen their pencil, even with respect to the risk pricing that they build in. So we are hopeful to receive multiple submissions based on everything we've learned from the region, and including other projects that are approaching completion and capacity of the local market.
Just to follow up, Madam Chair, and I appreciate your positiveness, and certainly March we'll have a better idea as we move into that meeting. But thank you very much, and thank you for all the work that you're doing here. And I like the glass is half full approach for sure. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. And Councillor Mackey.
Thanks, Madam Chair. Probably my question, I guess, Andrew, in your presentation, you mentioned in regards to the $35 a day supplement that there is an opportunity to get $15 a day. So maybe this question is for Mary Lou. Sorry, $15 a day up front. Is there advantages to the county in trying to seek that upfront dollars? I see Kim is.
Yeah, this would be a question that I would certainly like Grey County or Mary Lou, if possible, to weigh in on. But what we've seen is up to $35 top up for not-for-profit homes and municipal corporations. They are allowed to convert up to $15 of the $35 to an upfront payment, and that helps the not-for-profits and municipal corporations by limiting the amount of debt they have to take up front. Otherwise, the full 35 is paid during the 25-year operation period as a per diem per bed per day. So what we have generally seen is organizations maximize the amount they can convert upfront, and it wouldn't fall as part of a separate application. It falls hand in hand with this additional funding. Organizations can pick a checkbox to say how much of it they want to convert upfront. So I can speak to what I've seen in general, but perhaps I would ask if Kim or Mary Lou has something to add further.
Well, this will be part of our discussion, just the impact of the additional funding and how we're seeing this project being cash flowed at the March 14th meeting. I can assure you, Councillor, we ticked the box. So we did feel that, just on the surface, that it was to our advantage to reduce our borrowing. So.
Okay, thank you very much. Any other questions from members of the task force? Okay, so seeing none then, if there are no further comments, I would like to entertain a motion to receive this delegation. Yep, thank you. Vice Chair McQueen moving, and I think I saw Councillor Gregg's hand as well. Take that as a second. Any discussion? All those in favor? Thank you, and that motion is carried. And that allows us to move on to, thank you very much, Mr. Rodriguez and Ms. Wadsworth, for joining us this morning to illuminate on that. We now move on into items for correspondence, but there were none in the package, correct? And okay, and that allows us to move on to item 6, which is other business. Is there any other business we need to discuss at this point in time? Okay, so shaking head from the CAO, but I see Vice Chair McQueen.
Just overall, this working committee, thank you, Madam Chair, is in place throughout this term of this council, but I would think probably at some point there may be a site visit. I don't know.
Yes. Excellent. I would highly concur, and I did find it was very valuable that whole council meeting that we had recently. Certainly does, but to be able to walk what's on the piece of paper is always very helpful. So thank you for that suggestion. All right, any other business? Okay, seeing none, then that allows us to move on to the next meeting date. So Madam Clerk, it's to be determined. I looked through my March calendar. I didn't see a date yet. So did you want to advise us on the timing of those meetings, of our meetings?
I believe the next one scheduled is Tuesday, March 14th at 2 p.m.
Okay, all right. I don't see that in my calendar yet, but I think we had a bit of a glitch with it coming up on my calendar. Okay, thank you very much. So please be advised of that next meeting date. And do I understand that these meetings always occur virtually?
Yes,
okay.
The plan is for this one to continue virtually at this time.
Okay, excellent. Until we end up with that site visit, as Vice Chair McQueen has said. Perfect. All right, in that case, then I would like to entertain a motion to adjourn. Thank you. Moved by Councillor Mackey, seconded by Councillor McKay. Any discussion?